Welcome back to another episode. I have my recording buddy Ham today with me from Toy Story. Say hello, Ham. Say goodbye, Ham. Today we're going to be looking at how to give effective presentations. I have a recording of a talk I gave in the spring semester of 2020, slightly after the pandemic hit and all of our classes went online. But I like the way it came out. You may have to present to an audience of any size, whether it be 5 people or 500 or 10,000. You have research that you've done. You might have a school project. You might be invited as part of a national campaign. It doesn't matter what the circumstances. There are some principles that you can follow to be effective. So we'll talk about these in this presentation. Get rid of my verbal tick of the and the so. You'll know me from working with me in class, but always do as I say and not as I do. So let's dive in and take a look at this talk I gave, and then I'll wrap it up with some comments afterwards.
If you notice, the background of this picture is quite a historic place. I'm standing where Lewis and Clark stood when they finally made it up to the headwaters of the Missouri River. So this is where the Gallatin, the Jefferson, and the Madison River come together to form the mighty Missouri, which flows down and meets up with the Mississippi at St. Louis and then heads to the Gulf of Mexico. A little bit of trivia and history there. It was a couple summers ago. You can tell the haze in the background when we had the hellacious fire season. But onward we go. What are we trying to do? You, as the author and master of your destiny in this particular case, have to figure out how you're going to get your knowledge from your head out to the audience. Okay? So this is my methodology. I call it to is and to do. You've heard of Hamlet's to be or not to be. In this case, I've got two is's and two do's that we'll talk about. All right, so what's the first one? What is your talk? You're the subject matter expert. You know the content. You know the research you've done. You know what has been happening. You're involved with it. You have the task of figuring out from everything you know about whatever topic you're going to present on what you need to tailor for your audience. Okay? You usually get a time limit or a slide limit or a content or some parameters you need to work with, and you figure out how to tailor what you know, what you have within those confines. Okay, that's our first is. Our second is, who is your audience? The next thing you need to be aware of, right? We talk about this in technical writing all the time. Be considerate of your audience. Make sure you know who they are. What size of audience will you be speaking to? Is it a large audience, hundreds to thousands of people, or is it a small audience? They might be 5 to 20 people in a room. What is their skill level? Are they just the general public who has an interest in what you might be talking about, or do they do the same type of work that you are doing? What is their engagement level? Are they fans? Are they followers of your product? Are they your peers? Are they strangers? Are they your family? Are you giving your presentation to a potential employer or graduate school? All of these things roll into how you are going to tailor your talk. Okay? So we've got our two is's. Now we need to look at our two do's. Okay? What do you communicate? This is kind of similar to my first topic there, what is your talk? But once you have all of that, you need to figure out what you are going to tell them when you get up there. You will want to find anywhere from 1 to 3 topics of interest that you will dissect and digest over the course of your talk time. Most presentations I have given at professional audiences, you have a 15 to 20 minute block, and they tell you you will have X amount of time to give your talk, and then we ask you to reserve 5 minutes at the end for questions. Okay? You'll have to answer some questions to yourself. What stage of your, and I'm calling it widget, are you discussing? Is your presentation a proposal presentation? You know something about a topic and you want somebody to fund your investigation of it. Is it a progress presentation? You have been working on it and this is where we are to date. Are you done with it and now you need to communicate your results? Okay. How do you effectively do that, and what do you say? Okay? And most of all, this is the important one, how do you be memorable? Okay? This is our second do. You want to make your talk stand out. Use the tools available at your disposal, right? We have our voice. We can talk loud and make sure that they emphasize the points with it. We can talk quietly, building up to something. We can use PowerPoint, a presentation aid. Remember, we don't want to read our slides to our audience, but we want to use this to help guide them through the talk as we go along. You can't see me right now, but I'm using my hands to gesture all over the place because I am a nonverbal communicator. A lot of people are. The majority of communication is nonverbal, so you watch their face, you watch their hands, you watch their body posture. Is it open? Is it closed? All of these things. So how are you going to make your talk memorable? Okay, 2 is 2 do's. What is your talk? Who is your audience? What do you communicate, and how do you be memorable? Okay. Give careful consideration to your role. All right, we've talked about you are the subject matter expert. You are the left-hand side of this slide in this case when you're giving a presentation, and you have an audience you need to talk to. It may be large, like is pictured here, or it may be small. We discussed this just a second ago. Your role now is both the subject matter expert and the technical communicator. Okay? How do you get your point across? How do you make sure that you are successful in building knowledge amongst your watchers? Okay? Well, you need to decide what kind of talk are you going to give. Okay? I have 2 illustrations here, 2 talks. Okay? The talk on the left has a very broad scope, but a very shallow depth. We talk about maybe several things, but we do not get into detail on very many of them. This is perhaps most appropriate for a proposal talk or a progress talk, right? This is all of the things we've been doing, and this is the progress we've made on all of them. The talk on the right is a talk that has a shorter scope, but goes much deeper into those things I have chosen to talk about. This might be very effective for our progress talks. I am very interested in telling you about the oxygen sensors I've placed around the streams in Montana. Here's what I've found. Fish are thriving here, fish are dying here, what have you. Okay. There are drawbacks to both, and there are advantages to both. You need to decide when you're making your talk which one you'd like to choose, or go somewhere in between. Okay. Another key to being successful, right? Make an outline, map it out. Here is a pretty general outline of what a talk might be like. Okay. Looks very much like some of our documents we've written in class. Okay. We have an introduction. We introduce ourselves and our topic or our talk to our audience. We move into anywhere from 1 to 3 topics, and then we wrap it up. Okay? And this is represented by our 10 to 20 minutes in general. And we have smooth transitions between our topics, and that's what our arrows here all represent. We move our audience through so they enjoy what we're saying and they like what they're seeing. Okay? Through it all, you must remember you are guiding your audience through your content with you. They may have no idea what you're going to talk about or where you're going. That is your job to bring them along. Have you ever been in a car ride and you ask the question, where are we going? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Can we stop? Can we get out? Okay. We don't want to see that in our audience. We see that when they start fidgeting, when they start looking at their watch. Toward the end of class, when you start packing up your backpack, well before the person at the front of the room has signaled that they're about ready to be done. You've lost their focus. Okay? So you make sure to tell your audience where you're starting. Okay? And this is actually an interesting way to do this. Say, boom, we're starting down here at the bottom, and we are going to finish here. Your job is to make sure that you guide them successfully through and do not do this. You wander all over, you go off your notes, you go off on rabbit trails and tangents, and end up giving a talk that you did not mean to do. Sometimes it works out, but more often than not, at least from the talks I have been to, it does not. Right. Next, you'll need to decide how are you going to give your talk. There's two main classes that seem to be prevalent in the language, in the theory, and the methodologies that discuss giving presentations. There is the section on the left here. We have topic, subtopic, supporting fact, very text-heavy slides. This is the danger in developing a talk like this, because you'll be tempted to read. Another way of doing this is with a method called the assertion evidence method. Out of Penn State, Michael Alley has done a lot of research into this. Studies show that people remember more of the content when you use an assertion evidence type of talk. You make a statement with your title, and then you support it with the slide's content. Okay, so I've got some examples of this coming up. Okay. If we want to talk about Montana and how much surface water affects Montana, we might, if we were doing a topic, subtopic slide, say something like this. We would say, oh, Montana has thousands of rivers within its borders. And then you might see a slide that has every river named and how many miles it traverses through the state. You can imagine this. You've seen this in talks. The whole slide is full of text. I didn't do this to our salt our senses today, but you can picture it, I'm sure. Okay, another way to do this is with a slide that follows the assertion evidence model. Okay, where we say, oh, Montana is a very important headwaters state. We might discuss why that is so. The waters that land in Montana will either flow from here and meet up with the Columbia River Basin and go out to the Pacific Ocean, or they will flow on down through the Missouri and the Milk Rivers and end up in the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico. And you notice there's a little time delay on that little pop-up here, right? And you might discuss the fact that within the borders of Montana there are indeed 7,563 named streams or reaches, and if you stretch them all end to end, they would be in length 180,542 miles. All right? You are more likely to remember something like this than you are if we back up a little bit and go with this slide. As soon as I move off this, you've forgotten everything about it. But here, as you walk away from the talk, you will probably remember that, wow, there's over 7,000 streams in Montana, and end to end, they would be 180,000 miles long. Okay? Build these things into your talk, draw your audience in, engage them, make them interested in what you are telling them. Okay? You should definitely pick something that helps your audience see it. Okay? There's two really standout themes. Okay, you've got the theme on the left-hand side here, which is generally a light text on a dark background. This works really well for not overpowering the eyes. And don't put too much text on there, and you can have things gray out as they're no longer the active point, etc. with PowerPoint tools. Or you've got the option on the right-hand side, which is dark text on a light background. If you're staring at a talk like this for too long, this white background can be overwhelming. Okay, consider what type of room you're in. Is it a small room? Is it hundreds of feet long? How many screens are there? What is the resolution of the screen? Are they going to be able to see what you're talking about? Okay? Consider these. Now the next slide I took this from our usability talk earlier in the semester, but I have seen these combinations in actual presentations. This one here about made me have seizures. It was just crazy. But these are bad combinations. You do not want to use these in your talk. If you want to make an emphasis point, maybe using these, but do it quick and move on, because otherwise your audience is going to go crazy. And yes, I have seen light text on a light background. I don't know why. It was absolutely nuts. Using aids in your talk is a fantastic idea. You know, telling a story with charts or graphs, right? The old saying is a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, here is a chart. Using only the defaults, we might point out a few things that are wrong with this. If I were in a large room and I were sitting in the back, this would get lost. This tells me nothing. This is mirrored here. I know it's sales. Okay, we're talking about sales. And then, you know, I have my first quarter, second quarter of what year? I don't know. And then there's these tiny little numbers. Right, well, on the next slide, I have adjusted this a little bit. Okay. This is more presentation worthy. Okay, we've got our sales by quarter in the year 2019. This helps me. Gotten rid of the legend, bumped up the font size on pretty much everything, got rid of a bunch of those little extra lines in there because I don't need them. What I want the audience to get and walk away with is that we had a fantastic first quarter, and then we went downhill from there throughout the rest of the year. There is this general downwardly sloping trend. Okay? You get that from this picture. If you use graphs and charts in your presentations, make sure that you format them to be successful. Okay? You do not need to have a highly detailed chart on your PowerPoint presentation. Save that for the report. Save that for the written or printed material you might hand out for them. That's a better venue for that. Displaying on the screen, make sure it's easy to read and understand quickly. Okay? And then you want to wrap up, okay? End your talk in a meaningful and memorable way. The best example I can think of this is in classical music, and the piece that made me love classical music is the 1812 Overture. If you've never heard it, I suggest you go Google it, and if you can find a live version of it, it is amazing. Why? Because they have cannons in the climactic finale of it. You're sitting in there, you're listening to this, and then boom, cannons are going off. To just punctuate that, wow, we've built the whole piece up to this, and then we have literally left them with a bang. Okay, check it out. Make sure that as you go forward, be successful. Use all these tips and tricks that we've talked about.
All right. Well, let's make sure that we always consider who our audience is. Remember those two is and two do's. You want to build an effective presentation that keeps your audience engaged and makes them walk out of what you said to them thinking, wow, that's interesting. I've never thought of it in that way before. And as always, I am a proponent of using music to help us out in our daily lives. So check out that 1812 Overture and see what you think about the cannons. For now, this is Professor B out. Me and Ham are going to go do something else. Maybe have a ham sandwich. Shh, I didn't say that.